Here we are. It's Monday with Jesus, with Tom and Amelia. And where's Tom? There he is. All right, there we are. All right, I'm Amelia.
I'm Tom.
Okay, we're bringing to you today a story from the Gospel of John, chapter 13. And this is the Gospel lection for Sunday, May 15th.
May 15th.
Very special day in our
Magical
family.
day.
Somebody in this household has a birthday on May 15th.
It's my birthday.
Yeah, all right.
Yep. How about that?
Yeah, so we'll have fun
Wonderful
celebrating that.
coincidence of time.
And this story is a pretty darn good one for a birthday story, I think. So Tom will tell it for us.
When Judas had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. And if God has been glorified in him, he will glorify him in himself, and he will glorify him at once." Ah, little children, I am with you for only a little while longer. And just as I said to the Judeans, so also now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another, just as I have loved you, so that you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another.
All right, thank you, Tom. Okay, that's the story, short and sweet.
Right.
Yeah, let's talk about it a little bit. Verbal threads. Last week, I mentioned narrative analysis, and we talked about setting, time and place, because that story last week started with a lot of those indicators. This one starts with a major verbal thread, just a word or a phrase that gets repeated. So glorified, in the first couple sentences there, we got glorified like 3 times, and then glorify a 4th time. So what is it about? Well, I guess I want to back up. We'll come back to glorified, because the first thing is this statement when he had gone out. Who went out?
Judas went out at the supper when they were eating bread. Jesus gave a piece of bread to Judas, and when he ate it, Satan entered into him with the bread. And so Jesus said to him, go and do what you have to do, and do it quickly. And when he had received the bread, Judas ate it, and then he went out.
Okay.
And
So he went out, and then Jesus starts.
No. He went out, and it was night.
Hmm.
And then when he had gone out,
Okay.
Jesus said.
Yeah, sorry. Then he starts this business about glorifying, and he says, now the Son of Man has been glorified.
Right.
What did it have? Oh, I assume Jesus is talking about himself, I assume, Son of Man, as Son of Man.
Yes.
What does it mean by has been glorified?
He has been glorified in Judas going out to betray him. That's the immediate reference. And the implication is that this is his step toward glory. It's like in the discussion with Nicodemus, when he said, now, so the Son of Man must be lifted up. And it's the glorification of the Son of Man on the cross. So that this is an allusion to his being lifted up, and all these statements that have been made about his being glorified, and that he's glorified by his life. by the signs that he has done, of which the ultimate sign is his dying for his disciples.
Wow. It's really in contrast to how I think it's Mark, where Jesus goes to Gethsemane and prays, and is praying that may this cup pass from me. So here it's just a different.
Whole different.
Jesus seems to have a different spirit about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And this is the beginning. These verses are the beginning of what is called in the analysis of John's Gospel, the book of glory. This is the beginning of his final discourse, his final conversation with the disciples. It's in the frame of what was a fairly frequent motif in the stories of great men, including Socrates, of a discourse before death, and that these great men will make these statements to their followers, to their friends, before they die. So this is the beginning. These verses are the beginning of Jesus' farewell discourse that runs through the end of chapter 17. So it's by far the longest speech that Jesus makes in the whole of the gospel tradition. And this is its beginning. So he's introducing themes that will be picked up and developed in the later part of this farewell discourse.
Okay, so the first episode begins with when he had gone out meeting Judas. So Judas has left the little group, and Jesus is talking to his disciples. And then the second episode begins with him addressing them, I gather, when he says little children.
Right.
What's the impact of that?
Well, it's a very striking word. Teknon is the name for a child. Teknia, which is the word here, is for a little child. So for him to address his disciples as little children is on the one hand very affectionate. It's a loving term. On the other hand, it's quite striking that he would call this group of disciples, who are young men in their 20s, little children. But it's a sign of Jesus' position as their leader, as their teacher, and in a sense as their father.
Yeah. Okay, so what he says to them at this point is, I'm only with you a little longer. You will look for me, but where I'm going, you cannot come. Where is it going?
Well, he's going to be with the Father, as is stated as he says to Mary Magdalene in the resurrection appearance story. Go and tell my disciples, my brothers, that I am going to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. So that's where he is going. Okay. And the implication is that they can't follow him there, but that he is going to this place of glorification. And
because they're not going with him as he leaves, he gives them a new commandment to live by.
Right.
Which is to love one another. So is that new?
Well, that is striking. It isn't new in the sense of a commandment to love one another. The good scribe in Mark said that. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind and soul and strength, and your neighbor as yourself. Jesus, he affirmed that and built on that. Leviticus says, love your neighbor. But what it meant in that context and in these earlier contexts, there is a new dimension in love you. And that dimension is that I will give my life for you. that it's a degree of sacrificial love that is a new introduction to the motif of the love of God, the love of others. That is a motif throughout the scriptures that occurs several times. And so the new dimension of this is a degree of love that is expressed in what is going to happen then in the rest of this. It's also expressed in this farewell discourse, that it is told in a tone of love, and it's an expression of love, including when he prays to the Father for them. So I think that's a new dimension of love.
Now, when he says love one another, he's talking to his disciples. Is it a loving, would that be the church, the Christians, that they're the ones that are supposed to love each other, love one another? Do you think it gets extended beyond those who are believers in Jesus?
It is about the intensity of commitment within the beloved community is the most explicit reference. And in a way, it's poignant and ironic, because in the history of the followers of Jesus in the church, a tradition is a small suggestion for peace, that Christians would not kill each other. There has been, throughout the last 2,000 years, such a degree of conflict and of killing in the various dimensions of the Christian community, of the Christian church, so that there's a way in which this statement is somewhat ironic. Yet I think it's probably also a statement that is set in the context of the realization that there is likely to be extreme conflict in the community of Jesus' followers.
Yeah, well, I suppose part of what happens is people decide, well, those Christians aren't really Christians, and they're espousing things that we don't think should be espoused. So
that has certainly been the case.
Yeah.
At many points in history.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else you'd like to conclude with, Tom, before we sign off?
This is the beginning of the motif of Jesus' departure. And it is an expression of a degree of love that has inspired and energized that spirit of love. And that spirit in the Jesus story, especially in John, is one of giving oneself wholly for others. In this case, that they would for one another, for each other as part of the disciple community. And so this is a degree of love, of self-sacrifice, of giving of oneself. That is a new dimension of the possibility of love. And that is introduced at the beginning of this farewell discourse, and is then both a commandment that they would love one another, but it's based on their experience of being loved. So the implication in relation to us now, how do we avoid this kind of hostility that develops? Love one another. Be willing to give oneself for the sake of the other. That's what Jesus was doing. And that he was countering then this possibility of hate and conflict that was part of the traditions, that was part of the traditions of Israel. And so he is offering himself and recommending that to his followers. It would be a recommendation that it would be good for us to pay attention to now.
Yeah, definitely. All right, food for thought.
Jesus was a remarkable person.
Yeah.
And so there's a kind of energy that he introduced that has not been without ambiguity in terms of what people have done with it. But the impulse, the energy that has come out of these stories and out of this speech that follows is an extraordinary spirit. A spirit that glorifies God.
Yeah, I think if you were going to internalize any words of Jesus, this ending of this passage would be a good one to learn, even though I know, Tom, you said it was kind of convoluted, but it's pretty straightforward in some ways what he's saying. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another, just as I have loved you, so that you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Of course, it makes us think of the song. They will know we are Christians by our love, So big, good thing to take to heart this week. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Love one another.